Hello and welcome to the Just Here in the Dark podcast with me, your host, Sean. As always, I want to say thank you for tuning in. And also you can check out the podcast on Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And it would be very much appreciated if you would please like, share, subscribe, and rate 5 stars on your particular streaming platform. But with all that being said, without any further ado, let's get into our first story. This story comes to us from rcccmcc.com. Jerry was last seen in Hernando, Mississippi on December 23, 1977. On that night, Jerry had dinner with his family and then went to a Christmas dance with his girlfriend at the National Guard Armory. After the dance concluded, Jerry drove his girlfriend back to her house. He disappeared after this and has never been seen or heard from since. Jerry was last known to be driving his brother James' car at the time of his disappearance. The car was described as a white 2-door 1973 Pontiac Le Mans. The car has red and black racing stripes on the sides as well as the Mississippi license plate number DAY485. The car has never been located. Jerry's parents searched for him when he didn't return home by 12:30 a.m. He promised to be back by 12 a.m. His family reported his disappearance the next day. Investigators initially assumed he had left on his own accord. Multiple people tried to make it seem like this is what happened, but his family never believed it. Jerry has many good opportunities coming for him, and he had no reason to leave. Jerry also had Christmas presents in the back of his car for his siblings, so he definitely had intentions of returning back home. Jerry's siblings and family believe he was murdered and that his disappearance was racially motivated. At the time, Jerry's brother, James, was in an interracial relationship with a Caucasian girl. Jerry was borrowing James' car that night, and it's assumed he was probably mistaken for James due to that. His brother, Johnny, believes Jerry's murderer was Caucasian and a current or previous member of the KKK. It's also been noted that many Caucasian guys were unhappy with the fact that Jerry was the head quarterback of the school's football team. They did not agree with it, and they resented the whole thing. It's believed Jerry was stopped on Craft Road and was attacked and killed. Johnny believes the murder was planned out by the Klan, including the plan to bury the car, and they planned to block off the road so he couldn't get away. Multiple rumors have spread regarding Jerry's presumed murder. Investigators have also stated that multiple witnesses in the case have been intimidated by the presence of law enforcement. Jerry's family has also received death threats and such, and have been told to back off from the case. It's possible Jerry's remains were buried in a landfill after his presumed death. Johnny has criticized the police for mishandling the investigation into Jerry's disappearance, and they said they did not thoroughly investigate the case when he was reported as missing in 1977. More current investigators have released that valuable documents were missing from the missing persons file on Jerry. In 2009, the case received media exposure after human skeletal remains were discovered along the riverbank in Arkansas. The remains matched Jerry's description, but subsequent DNA tests revealed the remains did not belong to him. He remains missing. In February of 1984, James was killed under suspicious circumstances in Tate County, Mississippi. Investigators originally classified his death as a suicide and said he shot himself in the chest. His mother and younger brother, Jimmy, did not believe this. Jimmy had spent the whole weekend with James and said he didn't appear to show any behavior indicating suicide. The coroner report states, however, that James died from cardiac arrest. Johnny has stated he believes his brother was scared to death. Investigators have found no evidence to indicate James' death was anything other than a suicide. It's unknown if James' death has anything to do with Jerry's disappearance several years before. At the time of his disappearance, Jerry had a steady relationship with his girlfriend and a good-paying job at the cold water gas station. He was a senior student at the Hernando High School and was the head quarterback of his football team. Jerry was described as an ordinary teenager at the time of his disappearance and had no real enemies at the time and no one who wanted to harm him. Jerry's disappearance remains unsolved and foul play is suspected. His mother passed away in 1987 and his siblings are alive and continue to seek his killer and his remains.
Teresa is believed to have disappeared from her residence on County Road 241, also known as 8 Ditch Road, just off of Highway 62 near Risco, Missouri, on January 26, 2006. She was last heard from when she spoke to a relative on the phone at 10 p.m. the previous day. Teresa's husband, Gary Dale Butler, was working the night shift and tried to call her on his lunch break, but the call went to voicemail and he assumed she was asleep. He came home at 10 a.m. on January 25th and found his wife missing and their 2 sons, aged 2 and 4 years, home alone. The younger boy had a full diaper and an empty bottle. Teresa has never been heard from again. The family's video camera, PlayStation with games, Nintendo GameCube with games, large mag light flashlight, digital camera, and car stereo disappeared with Teresa, along with her purse and cellular phone. But her wedding rings, black leather jacket, and her forest green Jeep were left behind. She normally took off her wedding rings every night before bed. The rings were found on the floor under the couch. There were no signs of forced entry to the home, and no blood or indications that a struggle had taken place. But a key was found broken off in a lock at the residence, and the light bulb on the front porch was unscrewed. Cellular phone records revealed that a call was placed from Teresa's phone at 3:16 a.m. on the day of her disappearance to a residence in Gideon, Missouri. The man who lived there did not answer the phone at the time. He said he didn't know Teresa or anyone in her family. After her disappearance, her cellular phone was used to place a call to Clarkton, Missouri, to a home where 2 elderly women lived together. The women don't know Teresa either, and stated they answered the phone but heard nothing from the other end. Authorities are uncertain why the calls were made. Gary stated his wife was not having any problems prior to her disappearance, but her co-worker stated she had received upsetting phone calls from Gary's ex-wife. She told her father that Gary's ex-wife had threatened her. Gary has been ruled out as a suspect in her case and maintains that the difference between Teresa and his former wife were amicably resolved. A witness came to police and told them about a drug deal that supposedly happened within 24 hours of Teresa's disappearance, where drugs were exchanged for a video camera. After viewing its contents, the witness realized it was Teresa's. The police were able to recover the video camera in the spot the witness indicated, a water-filled ditch between Malden and Risco, but it had no serial number and there was no tape inside, so they couldn't prove it was Teresa's. In November 2019, Melvin Ray Hufford Jr. was charged with first-degree involuntary manslaughter and evidence tampering in Teresa's case. A photo of Hufford is posted with this case summary. Authorities stated he had been a person of interest in her case since shortly after she disappeared, and that he had confessed to causing her death. According to Hufford's statements, he, another man, and Teresa were getting high on methamphetamine the night she disappeared. After he injected himself and her, she said her chest was hurting, then passed out and died. He then wrapped her body in a tarp and took it to a ditch, then stole items from her home to make her disappearance seem like a robbery. Later, Hufford took Butler's body to his father's old abandoned house and hid it under a sink cabinet for a few years while he was in prison. After his release, he burned her remains, crushed the remaining bones, and dumped them in a ditch. Hufford's father stated he had seen the body under the sink, but hadn't touched it. Hubbard is awaiting trial in Teresa's death. He has an extensive felony record, including drug offenses, and has served 6 prison sentences since 1997. Investigators don't believe the second man he implicated in Teresa's death was actually involved in her case, and they don't anticipate making any further arrests. Teresa has no history of instability or of leaving without warning, and it would be uncharacteristic of her to leave her children unattended. She was employed in the photo department of Walmart in Dexter, Missouri at the time of her disappearance, and was scheduled to work at noon on the day she went missing, but never showed up. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance due to the circumstances involved. Investigating Agency, New Madrid County Sheriff's Office, 573-748-2516.
This story comes to us from allthat'sinteresting.com. The case had gone cold, some say because of police corruption and a cover-up, but it's heating up again now as a new sheriff discovers long-hidden evidence. On the morning of April 12, 1981, Sheila Sharp returned to her home at the Cabin 28 in the Ketty Resorts in California from the next-door neighbor's house. But the 14-year-old girl discovered inside the modest 4-room cabin instantly became one of the most macabre scenes remembered in modern American crime history, and has come to be known as the gruesome Ketty murders. Inside Cabin 28 were the bodies of her mother, Glenna Sue Sharp, her teenage brother, John, and his high school friend, Dana Wingate. The 3 had been bound by medical and electrical tape and had either been viciously stabbed, strangled, or bludgeoned. Sheila's sister, 12-year-old Tina Sharp, was nowhere to be found. Stranger still, in an adjoining bedroom, the 2 youngest Sharp boys, Ricky and Greg, as well as their friend and neighbor, 12-year-old Justin Smart, were found unharmed. They had apparently slept through the entire massacre, which had unfolded mere feet from their beds.